Hi, everybody. Hope you're doing marvelously well. We're big, we're bad, but we're not in black, we're in blue. With another FAQ Friday, Frequently Asked Questions Friday. So I hope you've had a good week. It's been pretty eventful, hasn't it? Last week, we lost Eddie Van Halen. The world was saturated on news about Eddie. And I think that's perfectly okay. He was a massive influence to anybody in music. His appeal, his technique, his feel, his songwriting, everything about him was, absolutely larger than life. So thank you, everybody that watched the videos that we had made. And I've enjoyed watching lots of incredible videos and catching up and listening to lots of great music. If you haven't, of course, please subscribe. Hit the subscribe button down there. And of course, you can go to Produce Like a Pro and sign up for the email list and get a whole bunch of free goodies. If you're a producer, engineer, mixer, if you're aspiring to any of those things, please go there because we have tons of stuff. Yesterday, for instance, we put out a full-blown mix session with our good friend, Mr. Mark Daniel Nelson. And you can go to yesterday's video and download all the multi-tracks and watch the video for free. We've done quite a few of those since the beginning of, mid-March, since so many of us have been in lockdown. So many of you have been in lockdown. We've done a lot of free courses. So please go back through the videos, download multi-tracks, watch free courses. We're always happy to help. This is a wonderful time to be an incredible community and to have such an incredible community. So thank you for being a huge part of it. Okay, so we got some good questions today. This is one we got a few weeks ago. Hi, I'm an artist and I've been offered a production contract. I don't have the money for a lawyer. Can you tell me what the difference is between a production contract and a producer's contract? Production contracts and producer's contracts are two completely different things. I don't think they're as common anymore. But this is a really, really good discussion to have, not just only from a perspective of an artist, because obviously artists are asking us questions all of the time, but also as a producer. What kind of contract do you want to offer and what contract do you think is fair to work with an artist? So traditionally, a production contract was offered by a producer to an artist, to a band, to a duo, whatever it might be, because they were going to develop them. And typically, if you were going to give a production contract to an artist, you would work your schnizzle off, you know what I mean? You'd really work your tail off because a production contract means you're signed to the producer. The producer would go to the label and get the band signed through him or her. So let's just say, back in the olden days of like 15 years ago, for instance, when these were a lot more, prevalent, you would develop an artist. You'd bring them in daily to the studio. You'd work them hard. You'd co-write with them. You put them with other writers. You produce them. You play on their tracks. You do whatever it takes to make them amazing. And you had to roll up your sleeves and work really, really hard for it. You can't just let the artists sort of develop on their own. You've got to get in there and work hard. Production contracts were all about development. The production contracts that I have done in the past, I would write 20 or 30 songs with the artist. I would put them with other writers. I'd produce the tracks. We would do so much to come up with a really, really amazing batch of songs. I'd work with them live. I still do. I still work with artists in this capacity. I would put them in rehearsal rooms and I'd work with them and you would just have a full package. And usually it's something you would expect to do in a few months. You would hope after 3 or 4 months of intensive work with the artist, you would have great performances, incredible songs, a band, an artist ready to go to just take on the world. That's why you would sign a production contract, because the producer who you were signed to under this production contract would take you to a label or labels. And I've done maybe 3 or 4 of these over the years, and all of them have been successful, and I would get them all signed to record deals. But the way it would work is like you would get a bigger piece of the pie. So when you signed the band that you had spent months and months developing, writing with, producing, co-writing, playing on, putting them on the road, all of the things you have to do. I mean, we're working with an artist at the moment, and we're coming in and we're doing photo shoots, video shoots, like all of these things. I mean, that's part of what you have to bring if you're going to do a deal like that. And so you take them to a label, and maybe there was an old school label of $500,000 in those days. That was pretty typical for a lot of bands. They get signed for about $500,000. A chunk of that would go to make the record. And most of the time, I would have a record finished. Quite often, that record would get released. And sometimes they'd retrack a few songs or they'd remix it. But quite often, they would take a lot of my quote-unquote demos, because they weren't really demos, they were master tracks, and release them. Mike Flynn and I did that with a band called Vedera. We developed them for a while and got them signed to Epic Records. We had a hit with them, a minor hit, but it was a hit. They were a great band. But we lived, eat, and breathed this amazing band called Vedera with this incredible girl singer. I feel really, really blessed to, have got into a room and worked, nearly 9 months on that, writing songs from scratch, rewriting songs, working with them in rehearsals, doing all of the things that you had to do. Proper development of bands. And, we ended up using the best people. We ended up having some of the best mixers involved, and the songs that we wrote and produced got put out on the record because we worked our asses off. Now, that's one way of doing it. It's not as common anymore, but if you are being offered a production contract and not a producer's contract, meaning the producer expects to get a larger chunk of the pie. Because when I would get an artist signed on a production contract, I would have had to have worked my butt off for months and months and months. They can't just let them flounder and do whatever they want. You've got to get in there and record and write and work really super, super hard. And if a producer has signed you a production contract and after just a couple of weeks isn't doing diddly darn squat, then walk away. But that's where you need a good lawyer, because I've heard so many horror stories, particularly in LA, where, artists, bands were signed to production contracts and the producer wasn't really doing anything. But the band was fantastic. And, people tried to sign the band, but they have this producer who hadn't worked hard enough, or if at all, on the artist. And they were effectively in the way because you couldn't sign the band without working out some kind of deal with the producer. It's a tough one. I think that there was probably a lot of unscrupulous people that would find young, up-and-coming artists and sort of sign them to deals. I mean, this has been going on since the 60s and the 50s. We all know about people that own something and feel like, they signed a contract to them, so now they own them. And that's unfortunate. So if you are really being handed a deal, which is like a production contract and not a producer's contract, make sure you have a lawyer look at it. Get a time limit. If the producer hasn't done anything after 6 months or so, walk away, but have it in the contract. If of 6 months of nothing, no co-writing, no production, no 10 or 20 songs written, no live stuff, none of all the things that you really need to do to justify that contract, then make sure you can get out of it. So if they're really offering you that deal, you need to figure out some get out of jail clauses. 6 months of inactivity, have to go. They have to have worked on a certain amount of songs with you. They have to have produced a certain amount of stuff. They have to meet some kind of deadline. You've got to create something, or else you'll get into situations that I have heard of and seen hundreds and hundreds of times. Being in Los Angeles, you see bands come through and artists come through over the years, and they've always got somebody attached to the project that either is going to help them and has massively helped them get there, or is just kind of there because they got them to sign a contract. And that's very, very unfortunate. When we were doing Vedera in the early mid 2000s, like 2, 3, 4, 5, there was other girl singer bands that people were trying to sign. And depending on how much freedom those artists had, It may have been very difficult to finish up albums because they had producers in the way. It's really, really difficult. If you're an artist, you've got to be really, really careful with this stuff. And the best way to do it is to make sure that you create things in the contract that they have to fulfill. So make sure that there's a certain amount of recording, a certain amount of time that they spent one-on-one with you, a certain amount of finished songs. You've got to put that into it, or else you could be signed to something more horrible than an actual record deal. Record deals can be horrible if you're signing a record deal. Trust me, I've signed 5 over the years. And to be honest, actually, they've all been pretty good. They've actually all been pretty good. I'm not going to be that guy that says record deals suck, because I've benefited from them. I've got to work with really incredible people. I think most of the people I know that think record companies suck, have had bad experiences, but also probably haven't brought their own A game as well. It's a really tough one, The traditional record company had lots of faults, but it also had lots of benefits, the ability to promote an artist. And the last thing you want to be is an artist that has like a producer attached to you who's going to get in the way and make everything drag on and then complain that, they weren't treated properly. I mean, I've heard that so many hundreds of times, but I've also witnessed it from an A&R perspective, where there's somebody in the way, always like trying to, have an opinion that isn't actually contributing to the songs, who hasn't developed the artist, who hasn't done it. This is why it's super, super important that whatever you do as an artist, you have a great lawyer look at it and you make sure that you can get out of it if they haven't fulfilled certain things. So create in that contract things they have to fulfill. Now, obviously, a producer's contract, not a production contract, but a producer's contract is a lot more fair for the artist and somewhat for the producer, because it's in that situation where you might say, if I get signed, I will pay you back what is owed. And that is fine, but it can get a little bit difficult. You need to find a place where everybody feels really, really comfortable. Traditionally, producers' contracts are for label deals, and they used to be 3%, sometimes 4%. And that's still pretty prevalent. But now, fortunately, actual royalty rates have got higher. But the record company, independents, majors, everything, expect to have a lot more fingers in the pie. They will expect to make money from your merchandising, from your touring, when you can tour, and they'll probably want a piece of your publishing if it's still available. All of this is quite possible now with record deals. The last band I got signed a year or two ago, we had to give up publishing, a percentage of publishing, percentage of the masters, of course, and, I think there was something on the merch as well, a percentage of the merch. However, all the royalty rates were much higher. We were I think we were about 25% royalty rate on a record. First artist getting signed 15 years ago was 13 points. So now suddenly, boom, 25. I've even heard of 30. The percentages are much, much bigger than they used to be. However, they'll probably spend a lot less money than they used to. And there's probably not as many options to make money from record sales for obvious reasons. However, this is really one of those things that you have to take on a case-by-case basis. It's why you need a good lawyer. When you're looking at either production contracts or producers' contracts, record contracts, whatever it might be, use a good lawyer. Record companies can be the best thing that ever happened to you, and they can be the worst thing ever happened to you if you don't have good people around you. Having the wrong producer attached to you can be the kiss of death, and I've seen it take down artists. If they're completely, beholden to them through a contract. But having a good team around you, which will morph, is great. As I could say, some of the artists we develop, I'll produce it, but I will also oversee it and introduce them to other producers and other writers, because I have great relationships with other producers and writers. And I don't need to own everything. My job is to build up this artist, build up the band. And if sometimes it's outside of my wheelhouse and I've got other people I know, other great talented people, I'm encouraging them to work with them. And to me, it's, as you know, it's all about community, and it's not about being exclusive. It's about being inclusive. And yes, there are bad people that will, try and take the artist away from you. It happens. However, if you are forthcoming and you know how to bring in good, talented people, that shouldn't ever be an issue. There's so many ways to work and build relationships. what gets really painful is where you try to own it yourself. So that's the producer's perspective. From the artist's perspective, make sure you're looked after. Make sure you have a bulletproof contract, but also remember 100% of nothing is nothing. So if you're nickel and diming the producer down on every single point, there might come a time where they just walk away and you don't have anybody that wants to work with you. So find something that's a compromise. Listen to smart people. Listen to lawyers. Don't get your local lawyer that doesn't work in entertainment because they will come at it from a different perspective. Try to find an entertainment lawyer. Try to find somebody that works in the business on a daily basis and understands this. And yes, it can be expensive. However, if you're young and you're beginning your career, it's a smart move. Spend the money on the lawyer because you will learn from it. Ask questions. Find out what's in the contract. Don't just give it to them and say, deal with it for me. Get involved. I know my contracts. I know what I've signed. I was really, really interested in that. When I was about 30 years old, I'd had my 5th record deal. I'd just come off the road of my God knows how many world tours. I'd done 3 months on the road with my band opening up for Godsmack when I was 30. And we had played all over the country. And I came off the road and everybody had sort of forgotten about me. 3 months away, everybody else was doing the gigs that I used to do. I remember thinking to myself, what am I going to do? And one of my options was to go back and go to law school. And it's always been interesting to me, but that side of the business is interesting to me. I didn't go to law school. I ended up working actually with Susanna Hoffs. There's an interview coming up soon. And she encouraged me just by being a wonderful person and easy to work with, that music was where I belonged. However, I was close to going to law school. And I love that side. I love the business side of what we do. There are so many pitfalls. There's so many things that could go wrong. But you just need to have good people around you that will guide you. You need to have good people. And there are good people in the industry. There are. It's not all death and destruction and horrible. I know the Hunter S. Thompson quote. I believe it was originally about film. Whatever it was, it's absolutely fantastic. It may have been about music. I'm going to read it aloud. It says, "The music business is a cruel and shallow money trench, a long plastic hallway where thieves and pimps run free, and good men die like dogs. There's also a negative side." I mean, that's kind of the reality. There is a lot of things about this business, especially, some of the older things that are pretty horrible if you open yourself up to be manipulated. If you sign one of those kind of production contracts where nobody actually works for you or does anything for months at a time, that's why you need a good lawyer. That's why whatever you sign, whether it be a production contract, producer's contract, record contract, publishing contract, agency, whatever it is, management contract, managers, whatever it might be, make sure you have a lawyer look at it and ask good questions and find out. And do things that feel right and work with people you trust and build long-term lasting relationships. The people I work with are people I have been working with for a snizzle ton of time. I have got good friends in this business and they have been with me since forever. I mean, I still work with friends of mine from England when I was 16, 17 years old. I've got all of those that I'm still close with. We work in the music industry. We all grew up together, doing all our various different things. And friends I have here since being in Los Angeles the last 20 plus years, same thing. I still can call on those people and they're a massive resource. And I have a great lawyer. I've had lots of lawyers. And my current lawyer is really easy to work with and very affordable and understands what I'm asking, has the big picture in mind, and frankly, takes my calls at the worst times. Thank you ever so much for that, Mr. Lawyer. I'm not going to say out his name because he's going to get inundated. Ask lots of pertinent questions. I think this is a really, really good discussion. Thank you for asking about production contract versus producer contracts. But I think ultimately this whole video is really about signing contracts. It's like, should you sign a contract? Yes, if you want to work with real people, you'll end up signing contracts. Because if they're really going to put their time and energy into your career, you will have to give something back if you make money. That's totally understandable. But you need to make sure that you're not putting yourself in a position where maybe you sign a contract with them and then they just sit around for 6 months, watching you rehearse. I've heard that story 100 times. You sign a contract, you need that person, especially a production contract, you need that person to be helping you and working hard and developing you and creating masters and doing something absolutely amazing for you. And if they haven't done that, then you should be able to just walk away. So make sure if that's a contract you get, talk to the lawyer, make sure you have an option to walk away if they haven't fulfilled a set of criteria that you're going to give them. Because you can mutually agree that and really not be a big deal. I have developed bands, but developed artists that I've spent 2 years with before they got signed and done, 20 songs, 30 songs, 2 EPs, an album, till we eventually got them a record deal. It takes time sometimes. And then other times you're spending a couple of weeks with somebody and you're helping develop them and people start to get interested. And that happens too. But generally speaking, it's a lot of work. It can take several months and sometimes several years. But you're going to have to do a contract as an artist and as a producer. Make sure you do a contract to protect yourself. It's all fair. And it's not a case of it's all fair in love and war. It really is fair. There is a way to get this so that you really look after your artist and your artist feels like they're being looked after by you, obviously, and they want to look after you. That can happen. All of the stuff that I've worked on over the years is pretty fluid, and I'm happy to walk away from something and not have my ego bruised if it's actually in the best interest of all people involved. I've been in situations where, I would be holding somebody back and they've got great opportunities and I've torn up a contract. I've happened. And I'm not running around telling people I got screwed over. Rah, 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 rah. I mean, that's ridiculous. First of all, that if I'm running around saying that, it says one of two things to me. It says I'm bitter and I'm really not in the right industry if I'm going to be like that. And number two, I don't want to be the guy running around and complaining. Who wants to work with the guy that's running around complaining, going, Arr. There's so many opportunities. There's still opportunities. I get emails every day, 4 or 5 a day, from people wanting to work with me and produce them. This is a great business. There's so much opportunity out there. And it's all about when that person walks in through the door, what can you do for them? How can you help them out? And if sometimes it means getting out of the way and help introduce them to people that can take them further, that's a big part of the job. Rather than being, I didn't get what I needed. Get a contract, get protected, and help your artist out, because that's going to do you a lot more good in the long term to be the person that looks after talent and develops it than the person that runs around complaining. So there you go, a whole episode on contracts. I think there's going to be a bunch of comments and questions about this, because we're just scratching the surface. So please leave a bunch of comments and questions below. I love talking about this stuff. And one heck of a Frequently Asked Questions Friday, all about contracts. So I hope you're doing marvelously well. Please leave a bunch of comments and questions below. If you haven't already, subscribe, hit the notifications bell, go to Produce Like a Pro, sign up for the email list, and I'll see you all again very soon. So long, farewell, la vida, au revoir, adios.